What up, world? This is the GoalNet recording live from outside Chicago. First things first, for anybody that thought I may have retired, that is not the case. If you haven't spent much time in Chicago, the weather kind of blows. It's ridiculously cold in the winter for very long stretches with tons of darkness. And then it's absurdly hot in the summer with really bad humidity for good chunks of the summer. So what am I getting at here? When the weather is nice, you've got to get outside, you've got to enjoy it, and you can't spend too much time in the rink because there's a solid 8 months a year for that. And of our 4 months of summer, there's probably only maybe 60 days that are enjoyable. So I've been trying to embrace a little summer break this year, but I have been getting on the ice, I have been testing gear, and wanted to follow up what is probably my most requested video, and that is the difference between the Premier 2 and the EF4 pads. I will also make another video at a later date comparing the 580 glove to the 590 glove, and maybe we'll do a blocker video, but that would really just show the difference between the sidewalls on the EF4 and the P2. I could probably crank that one out in about 38 seconds. So, first things first, the EF4 has knee rolls, the Premier 2 does not. The knee rolls do not actually add functionality to a goal pad at this point in time. There was a day and age when the outer rolls and the shin rolls were used to hold the pad up, and then the horizontal knee rolls were used to give the pads flexibility. Now that all of the pads are made from an engineered foam core and not from deer hair or any sort of stuffed material, the engineers at hockey companies like CCM can design the way they want the pad to break, where they want to break, based on the shape of the foam inside the pads, if it actually has any cuts or recesses, and then lastly, the stiffness of the foams laid up together inside the pad. One other thing we should note before we get too much further in this video is that neither one of these pads is stock. They're both options that are 100% available at retail. And basically, I just customized the brake, the inner core stiffness, the boot brake, the strapping, and that is all stuff that anybody can do via no charge via CCM's customizer. But that's just one thing to point out before we get too far into this video. If you're looking at these pads wondering why you don't see an outer brake in the outer knee roll, it's because I like a stiffer pad, so these do not have an outer brake on them. But aside from the obvious aesthetic of the knee rolls, there's a few key differences to these pads. The first is the inner edge. The Premier 2 has the famous rounded inner roll versus the EF4 has the more common squared away flat edge. The boot brakes are different. One will sit higher up on your boot, being the Premier 2. The EF4 will sit closer to your boot. The standard width of the leg channel is also different, even though mine are both the same. The flex at the boot will be different at retail. Mine are different, but they are both the softest you can get with either one. And then lastly, the other big change is the way the rebounds will come off of it. The Premier 2 uses the max rebound technology, which is a soft foam that compresses when the puck hits it, rebounds and knocks the puck away, versus the EF4 uses a softer foam in the pad face, so when the puck hits it, it dampens it and stops in front of you for rebounds. So now that we've kind of done the quick overview, let's actually stop and do some visual references and explain what this means side by side. So here are the pads side by side. As you can see, they both have some puck marks. The P2s will have significantly more puck marks because those were my gamer pads for most of last season. And the EF4, just kind of the way the timing has come in with gear this year, I haven't quite gotten to use them as much, but I will definitely put them through their paces between now and next year. But if we look at this inside edge, when I talk about the Premier 2 having a rounded roll, you can see that this inner surface is round. So the face of the pad actually stops a bit short, and then there's about a 1-inch roll on the inside of the pad. And for me, and you can see it goes all the way up from the boot all the way up to the tip. For me, this is the thing that makes the Premier 2, in my opinion, the best ceiling pad on the market. Again, that is an opinion. Everybody's entitled to their own. But I believe that this roll here just gives the pad that little bit of extra seal, where if you get any torquing or twisting in the pad face, kind of any of that torsional flex, which again is not what P2 is known for. But if you can see, maybe a little bit hard to show, but even if you get a little bit of that torsional flex, because this is essentially sitting below the pad, this will actually, in my opinion, help with the seal. And the second thought as well is that because this roll actually sits basically lower than the pad itself, and it's a relatively soft foam, you can see how much that compresses there, is that that will actually hit the ice first and give your body a little bit of additional cushioning. That's one thing that I've really come to appreciate more and more, is just making sure that you're protecting your knees, and that's not from hockey pucks, but for your own body weight. You know, CCM has done research with a PhD at a Canadian university, and Dr. Ryan has basically figured out that you put 2.5 times your body weight on your knees. So I weigh a little bit over 200 pounds. So let's go 210. 210 times 2 is 420, and another half. So, you know, we're looking at about like 500 pounds when I go down. That is an incredible amount of force to put on your body. So if this roll says that it gives your body a little bit extra cushioning by design at CCM, I think that's a great feature. So between the seal and the additional cushioning that it provides, I'm a big fan of this inner roll. But I will say, just kind of based on industry trends that we see, where a lot of people were copying this style pad or going away from it, I do have a feeling that this style roll is probably something that we may see phased out over time. Hopefully CCM does keep it around. You know, I don't have any facts here, I'm just kind of guessing, but just based on industry trends, a lot of people were copying CCM for a while. They've stayed loyal to this great proven design, but it does seem like a lot of the industry is moving away from it. So if we compare this side by side with an EF4, it's a little bit of a raised edge. It may not be perfectly flat, but as you can see, it is significantly flatter, like it may be just a little bit radiused. Hopefully we can get that on camera where it's not a perfectly flat surface. It's just radiused a bit, so the center of this will bump up just a little bit. But again, nowhere near like the P2. And then if we look at the top of the pad, you can see the pad face goes all the way across the pad and stops, and that gives us almost a 90-degree edge here. Versus the P2, you know, the pad stops about there and the roll comes out. And the reason that has to be like that is the pads can only be 11 inches wide. So if CCM is using an inch of roll with this piece here, the pad face itself stops almost an inch short. Versus on the EF4, we can go almost all the way across to the inner sliding edge. So to me, you know, I think most people will focus on the knee rolls, but to me, that is the biggest difference in these pads. And again, that's a matter of opinion. There are, you know, 4 to 5 differences, which we'll go through. But to me, that's the biggest thing I notice in using these two different pads. And if you've worn a Premier pad for a long time, which I did, I went away from it, wore those pads, and I said this in my video review, it was really like a homecoming. There's a very distinct feel to a Premier that I feel like only a Premier has, and that's why I think we've seen so many pro goalies loyal to that style pad for so long. So let's keep moving on with the review. The second piece is a little bit hard to show on video. Now let's see if we can find any of the eyelets. Expose the orange foam. So pretty hard to see, but inside right in there, you could actually see a large layer of orange foam, and across the whole face of this pad, there's a thin sheet of orange foam, which is very soft and has a very high rebound to it. So the point of that is that when the puck hits it, the foam actually kind of, so if this hand's the puck and this hand is the foam, kind of hits, the foam compresses and then springs to knock the puck away, versus most other pads on the market are hard and firm. So the puck hits that, compresses and goes away. The second example would be very similar if you've ever seen a slow-mo video watching golf, where they show how much the driver, you know, the titanium driver is a nice hard face, the golf ball compresses and explodes away. That's how a lot of the pads are done on the market, but CCM uses the foam to compress as opposed to the puck to get your rebound. Versus on the EF4, This is designed to meet a different feel of a goalie who may have a different philosophy and a technique. So this whole face of the pad is soft, but it doesn't quite rebound the way that the max rebound material does. So it actually kind of, if this is the puck again, it's going to compress and just kind of stay compressed, and the puck will drop in front of you. So sorry if those visuals are a little bit crude, but hopefully that's making everything clear. So the point is, a puck hits the EF4 pad, it dives in front of you, you stop, put your glove over and get a rebound, versus P2, the puck's going to hit the shin, ricochet off into the corner, and give the goalie time to recover. And again, that was another Premier feature that I think has become maybe more talked about, but I want to say it was the XLT that CCM started talking about, the hotter rebounds, and now that's a trend in basically every pad. And again, companies have different philosophies, hard versus soft, from getting there. Versus EF4 is a traditional pad, the puck hits it, it stops in front of you, you should be able to get a rebound. The next big area of difference are the boot breaks on the pads. All right, so the two big differences on these pads are both the angle of the boot, the flexibility of the boot, and then based on the boot angle, that will actually change how the pad sits on your legs. So again, Premier is the traditional Lefebvre design, which is what CCM calls a 60-degree boot. So if you can imagine this being flat on the ground, we should see kind of a 60-degree angle, right at this joint where you can see the stitching. So the line from here up through there should form a 60-degree, and if we think 90 should be a straight up and down angle, this would be 90 by comparison. So this is 60, where it's a little bit more of an open angle, and here is 90, where it's going to be a perfectly square angle. So the point of this boot is two things. A, it has the pad sitting higher up on your leg and off your skates. And what that does is it pushes the shin further off your leg versus worn very tight and flush against your shin. And then secondarily, if we look at this in the butterfly, in this position, it's going to be the angle. So if we're in the butterfly with that 60-degree, it should knock the pucks away from us. And this goes back to the max rebound versus the softer traditional EF4 style. This angle, if it were a right angle, it would kind of sit like this. It hits the puck, it's going to stop directly in front of your boot. But with this P2 style angle here, and it's a bit more open and it's going to be springier, instead of knocking the puck right in front of you, it should actually deflect the puck away into the boards. Now, if we compare this with the EF4, this is what we call 90. So if I make the 90-degree kind of angle with my hand again, you can see that this is much more square. So the point of this is that the pad is designed to be worn closer to your leg. And again, anybody can wear any pad the way they want. So please realize this is just kind of a guidance, a suggestion, and essentially what the engineering team was thinking when they were designing these pads. I've met a lot of the people at CCM. They have very smart people working on their hockey equipment. These aren't guys that play goalie and just kind of sketch up ideas. These are degreed engineers that take physics and engineering and science into account when they're designing goalie equipment. So again, this angle is 90 degrees. This foam is soft, so it's designed to sit nice and tight to your boot, nice and securely to your leg. And because this is 90 degrees, this shin is going to go straight up from your boot and designed to be worn more closely to your calf. And then when the puck hits these rebounds, as I mentioned earlier, it should stop right in front of you, and you should be able to get a whistle versus the Reebok kind of style, the Premier coming off here. It's going to be a flatter boot. So this is probably one of the hardest things maybe to show on camera without a protractor, but I will take a couple cracks at it. So if we see down here, if we look at it from this angle, you can see I can actually hide my hand behind the EF4 there, showing me that the Premier is kind of flatter here versus this is straight across. And when I say flatter, I mean kind of more opened up. And we'll try this with the Premier on top as well, just to show the difference. And now when we do the Premier on top, you can see that this more obtruse angle here is going to be open. And because this is perfectly straight across down here in the EF4, when we had the EF4 on top, we couldn't see the Premier. and we have the Premier on top, we can still see the toe right there of the EF4. So hopefully that explains the boot angle. So when this sits open, it's gonna push the pad higher on your leg. And when that sits flat, it's gonna push it closer to the toe, and then that's gonna affect the angles the rebounds come off. Now the other difference on these pads is how flexible they are in the boot. All right, so aside from the boot angle, we also have boot flex differences. So if you watched my review on the EF4, or not my review, excuse me, my deep dive kind of going through the specs, and I also did a video walking through the CCM EF4 customizer explaining what specs I ordered and why. You'll remember that I got both of these pads with the softest boot available. And just for reference, the softer boot on the Premier 2 is probably relatively similar to the stiff boot option on the EF4. However, I like a soft boot, so I got both the soft options. So on the Premier 2, the soft boot is called the Shallow Soft, and on the EF4, the boot is known as the Deep Ultra Soft. And with both of these on a P2, you can get a Shallow Stiff, or on the EF4, you can get a Deep Soft as opposed to the Deep Ultra Soft. The Ultra is the softer of the two. The P2, again, pads are basically a year old. You can see I've got that classic inner edge wear that I get on basically every pad. We've got some discoloration, puck marks, like those are very well loved pads, versus the EF4s have 3 or 4 skates on them. So keep that in mind when I show you the flexibility differences as well, that the P2 is fully broken in and the EF4 is not. So as you can see, not stiff by any reasons, but you know, it does have some kind of give back. It's flexible enough, but it's also kind of responsive where the pad pops back into place. And if we check out the EF4, this is by far and away the softest boot I've ever personally seen or used on a goalie pad. Again, I wish I had scientific equipment to maybe quantify, but maybe from that angle you can really tell I'm barely putting any pressure on this pad, and that boot just moves at will. So this is going to move really naturally with your body in and out of the RVH. And if you're a goalie that maybe uses traditional skate laces with without the elastic or without a lot of knots, you will really feel this boot move with your body as you recover, as you butterfly slide, as you RVH. I mean, if you look at this angle, you can almost get that boot in a fully round position where the rolls touch each other, versus on a P2, you could never really scrunch the boot that much. So I'm putting significantly more weight on it, and you can see you just can't get that area to collapse on itself like you can with the EF4. So P2 soft boot is flexible, just to make sure that that's very clear. It just is not as flexible as the EF4, so keep that in mind when comparing the two pads. You can see it moves and it's responsive, but I mean the EF4 really just writes the book on a whole new level of softness. So that's crazy. If you haven't checked that out in a store and you think you like a soft boot, definitely check out the EF4 boot. All right, so the other areas we could look at flex are in the thigh rise. So both of these pads are no outer brake, double brake core with an pre-curve on them. So you can only get a pre-curve on the EF4. If you go with a Premier 2, you can get a completely straight pad. That is one upside of ordering Premier 2 over EF4, is that there might be as many as twice as many options for pad cores on the P2 compared to the EF4. But as you can see, both of them have a great classic S shape. Pre-curve comes in very, very well. I do think maybe moving forward, I would probably maybe go with just a single brake below the knee just to stiffen these up a tad more and not above. But these both work great. And that is one of the things I really commend CCM with on the EF4, is that even though it's a very flexible pad, the one area of the pad that you do need some stiffness, and that's so that pucks don't bend your pad in the wrong way, is the thigh rise. And CCM's done a really great job on this pad with the thigh rise. So I'll try and show that stiffness again, but just again, when people want to see shape, the boots are different, but the top both have that good S-curve. All right, so trying to hold the boot to kind of isolate it to just show you the thigh rise flex. So again, this is a double inner, no outer break. And depending on what brand of pads you're coming from, it's actually relatively firm. I mean, it definitely gives, but you can't, as I showed you with the boot, you could like bend that back. I'm putting a lot more force on this pad than I did when I did the boot, and it gives, but it's not giving too much. And again, the idea with that is that when a puck hits it, you never want, you can see when I'm in this position, only using my hands, I can't bend it back too much, is you never want this to bend in the wrong direction. So let's compare this to a very heavily broken in P2. And as you can see, just from usage, these pads are actually kind of softer up top in the thigh. So that's one thing to note too, if you're considering them. P2s do get softer over time, as all goalie pads do, but my point here is that if you see a P2 in a store and think that it's too stiff, definitely realize these will break in over time. So I have a feeling once both pads were used, they might be kind of similar, but if you go with, a single break above the knee or the double break internally, for my money, I think both the P2 and the EF4 are gonna have pretty similar stiffness profiles when it comes to the knee area if you get them spec'd out the same. But the boot area, again, are the areas that they're gonna be very different. So I think the last thing we'll check out on the video, which is very subtle today, is the strapping system. So one thing I need to point out too is my video editing skills are probably one of the worst things you will see on YouTube. I hope most people tuning in are tuning in for the content and the learning and not for the video quality. So with all of the crazy flexing that I've tried to do here, excuse me, if anybody's gotten nauseous or seasick, I apologize. I don't actually know how to edit that and correct it. So I do appreciate your flexibility with that. So standard on the P2 is loose fit. Standard on the EF4 is the tight fit. I actually went with tight fit on both of them. So stock with an EF4 and then more narrow than stock with a P2. And on the EF4, there's a ultra tight boot channel, the ultra narrow boot channel. So you can actually get the wraps even tighter together than I did here. So it's the super tight fit versus the tight fit versus the loose fit. And you can get the loose fit on either pads, the tight fit on either pads, but you can only get the ultra tight fit on the EF4. But one of the other differences too, I forgot to mention, just kind of looking at it, is the wrap itself. You can see the EF4 wrap kind of stops even with the inner edge of the outer roll, versus the EF4 wrap comes down almost all the way to the boot binding and kind of to the TGN initials. And then due to that being longer, it's got a segment there. And then if we compare these side by side, because I believe the P2 wrap is a little longer as well, you have the foam here in the segment so that gives, versus the only segment on the wrap is in the middle. And another thing, if you're not aware, like we see the stitching in the wraps, all of that is designed to just give the foam a little bit of flexibility, or if that piece of foam is gonna flex there anyway, is to try and steer and control how it flexes. And if you talk to people that know equipment and know goalie pad design, that's one of the things that the Lefebvre designers do very well, both Michelle and now Pat, is that they're very fantastic at refining designs and getting a lot of the little subtle things right, i.e. like how to segment the wraps so that they're comfortable, responsive, and flexible all at the same time. So both of these were ordered with the open knee, not the recessed. I don't have a knee wing up top on either, so I do Velcro down at the knee and then just the quick motion strapping here. But there are some differences between the quick motion strapping. So the quick motion strapping also comes from Dr. Ryan's research that I mentioned earlier with like the body weight. And basically the assumption there is that you need some sort of nylon strapping on the pad to make it more responsive. If it's all elastic, the thought is that it can become too sloppy. And basically what that means is that your body might get down to the ice before the puck and the puck could squeak under it, versus with a nylon, the pad is going to move with your leg more, should get down to the ice at the same time, and you won't get squeaker goals. And I believe CCM's quantified, they believe that this style strapping actually gets the pad to the ice 1.5 puck distances faster. So that may save you a squeaker or not. But there are some differences with this. And so the pads are located, if you look exactly in the same locations, so that means that they will both function the same. But what the difference is this version of quick motion strapping is a little bit of an evolution. And being that goalies wearing E-Flex may want more adjustability, they may want to wear the pad tighter, gives you some options. So with the P2, it's just one single strap coming out of the wraps here. Coming out of the wrap, and if we open it up, we can see there is a Gen Pro Y strap, but it is inside the wrap and not exposed, versus here it is fully exposed. So it's a very subtle difference, and you can see it's also mounted further out. When the Y strap there goes all the way into the basically the inner gusset, versus this one is attached to the sliding piece. So it's a very subtle difference, but as you can just kind of see both of these laying side by side, I believe the way that this molded Gen Pro piece is here, this will actually wrap around the goalie's leg a little bit more than it will on the P2. And that just goes back to the fact that the thought process is people will wear P2 a little bit looser. We will wear EF4 a little bit tighter. So very subtle difference, but hopefully you can see how it sits out more versus on the E-Flex, it wraps in and is a little bit tighter. The other difference on these pads, which again is very subtle, but it's how the inner calf portion, which is one of my favorite features of these pads, but it's a little bit of an evolution and it gives you a little bit more adjustability. So if we look at the E-Flex 4, or excuse me, if we look at the Premier 2, this inner piece is a Gen Pro. And then there's Velcro adjustability here, and I didn't adjust it, but if I wanted to, you have about 1 inch of adjustability there. So if you needed to, you could kind of move your strap out, you know, 1 inch, 1/2 inch, and that's all of the adjustability you have with it. That is something I never touched using these pads. So let's get that back into place here. All right, so that's Gen Pro. It is nylon on the EF4 series. It's still a Y shape, and it's nylon on the back with the ripstop, and then it's got Gen Pro, and I want to say there's a foam piece in the middle, versus on the Premier series it is just the Gen Pro, so it's a little bit more of a premium design, I'd say. But the other difference is when it comes to adjustability, this D-ring here, or O-ring maybe is the proper term, but that's going to figure out how far that's going to slide. So if I really want to tighten this up, I have skinny legs, I like my pads insanely tight or whatever, I could move this all the way in here, still be able to Velcro it there, and now let's say I have 3 inches of adjustability versus 1 over on the P2. So that means this quick motion strapping is probably 3 times more adjustable than the P2 strapping. So I'd pull this out. I don't want to touch this because I'm very happy with the strapping length, but I would just move this ring here. I would have some extra elastic slack, and then that would make this pad much tighter. The other thing as well is that we've got another O-ring here attached to the Velcro, and this gets back to what I was talking about with the Gen Pro here. Very, very subtle difference, but I think this will just give the pad a little bit more of a wrap feature here with the D-ring and the elastic versus, or in the Gen Pro versus this is just the elastic double Velcro here. They're double elastic with the Velcro. It's a little bit more premium. We've got the Gen Pro, we've got the ring. I think that's gonna give it a bit of more natural motion. The last difference with the strapping, which is very subtle, but it goes back to getting details right, is the Velcro here has a nylon trim, and then the end of the strap here has a piece with a CCM logo on it. And the purpose of that stuff is just to ensure that any of the nylon here doesn't get beat up from the Velcro. So this will be kind of like a wear strip, and this will protect the edge of it. I did have some wear here on my P2s and the nylon that is from knee pad elastic. I don't wear socks or my knee pads. It's not from this strap, but it just goes to show that this nylon material and Velcro can get beat up. So I think this is a subtle design tweak, but I do think it's a really good design tweak that CCM put on the back of the pad there. And then if we go up the pad, both pads have the 3D molded landing surface. They both have the big oversized knee block with the wedge for landing. You can see the P2 has that as well. And then there's a couple subtle differences. Premier 2 has the ripstop in the middle of the leg channel and nothing on the inside of the wraps, versus the EF4 has the additional segments on the inner wrap, this molded foam design, but does not have the ripstop inside there. Those are pretty subtle tweaks, but just like to again point out the strapping system is different. The EF4 is going to be a little bit more flexible, but in terms of playability, both of them should be very comfortable and very responsive. So as we go to wrap this video up, we'll just kind of review the different features of these pads. Biggest change is not the knee rolls. I personally think it's the inner surface with the Premier 2 being rounded and essentially being an extension off the face of the pad this way, versus the EF4 goes all the way to the sliding edge and is flat. Then when it comes down to the boot, we have the 60-degree boot versus the 90-degree boot. A more flexible boot option on the EF4 compared to the Premier. And then the way that boot sits is going to change the way it feels on your leg and the way the calf sits. We have different rebounds. EF4 is designed to dampen rebounds. P2 is designed to kick rebounds. We have a subtle tweak to the quick motion strapping as well. And then, as I mentioned earlier, if you get the core the same with thigh rise stiffness, I personally found them to be pretty similar when they're spec'd out the same. EF4 might be a tad softer, but as you can see, that had really good structural integrity when we compared those side by side. So that is the Extreme Flex 4 compared to the P2. Again, thanks for anybody that's been a little bit disappointed I haven't been cranking out more videos this summer. We did hit a milestone recently, 1,000 followers. So thanks to everybody that's made the goal net on Instagram a really growing success. When I first started doing Instagram videos, I never thought it would stick. And I was only using YouTube as like a cloud service to host videos for my website. But really glad with the progress. So thanks to everybody watching that's already a follower. If you're just tuning in, please give me a follow. Really appreciate it. It helps the account grow. So again, thanks to all the followers. Thanks for your patience. This is the GoalNet signing out, and we will definitely have some more comparison videos coming in the future. We will have a jet speed video review as well as some products from other brands. So thanks again, and this is the GoalNet signing out.